Drums roll like thunder under a low sky and dust climbs, tasting of ash and iron. Across the plain, the Qizilbash surge, banners snapping, hooves beating a fever. While on the ridge, the gun line waits inside a hush of wood, cord, and cold bronze. Match cords glow, muzzles stare, and the air tightens as belief throws itself at geometry and powder. When the spark jumps, one world will end and another will begin. And no prayer can muffle the verdict of this age, sealed forever. He rides inside a whirl of red caps and oaths, a young monarch whose poems pass like sparks through dry grass. Around him, the Qizilbash lean forward in their saddles, eyes bright, lances lifted, the kind of faith that believes a shout can break iron. Banners flick and the dust tastes sweet and bitter, a perfume of horse sweat and glory promised. In this glow, the world feels soft to the touch and the charge already half written in the air. Across the frontier, another rhythm speaks, colder and steadier, where Selim builds an empire that breathes by count and measure. Ledgers close with the weight of coins. Wheels grind along roads packed by quartermasters. And Janissary stand in files that swallow fear and give back timing. Matchcord embers wink like patient stars, while officers trace lines on earth that tell men where to live and where to die. The storm will cross this line and meet a system meant for gunpowder. They ride under oaths that taste like fire and honey. A covenant stitched into red caps and silk. A promise shouted to the horizon. The king is more than a ruler. He is a vessel of blessing. And his riders believe distance and doubt can be cut by a single charge. Lances tilt. Bowstrings breathe, and the earth drums back. Each heartbeat an amen. Faith leans forward in the saddle and expects the world to make room. And the morning answers. Across the line, another creed keeps time with coin and command, measured in ledgers, rations, and quiet signals. Pay chests close. Muster rolls whisper. And Janissaries drill until fear has no place to stand. Their breaths sink to cane taps and matchcord sparks. Roads are fed by pack trains. Magazines are locked. Officers measure intervals with the care of craftsmen. Stakes planted and wagon rims squared. The vise tightens, and the next sound will be the language of iron and flame. Spoken by tools that do not forget. Bronze mouths squat on timber beds, their rims black with soot and purpose. Lined in ranks that face the open plain. Gunners heave trails and bite boards as platforms let barrels slide a hand's breadth. Enough to comb a lane with iron. Behind them, Janissaries breathe in file and fire in turn. Match cords glowing like coals held in a steady fist, while layered smoke unrolls and closes again. The sound does not rush. It marches. And the rhythm is a law that turns courage into fragments. Across the field, the Safavid kit glints with grace. Horn and sinew bows curve like crescent moons. Lances bright. Mail and plate heavy with promise. Muskets are few and scattered. Brave hands without a single spine of fire to guide them. No long wall of smoke and spark to answer measure with measure. Riders can break men, but not earthworks. And they cannot close the last breath of ground if timing cuts it away. From here, the path bends toward choices on the march. And one will carry powder like daylight in a box. Sealed edicts move like stones dropped in a still pond, and the ripples are men. Fires burn to ash before dawn. Orders passed in low voices. And pack trains snake east with salt, shot, and bread. Officers sketch routes in dust and close the map with a palm. Then the columns rise and the road swallows them. Discipline is the handle on the blade, and Selim grips it until the steel is warm. Under scarlet banners, Ismail lifts a vow above the wind. A promise that powder is a coward's crutch and faith will carry the day. Cheers roll through the ranks and riders slip from camp like knives. Raiding, returning, certain the horizon is already theirs. Scouts vanish into dust and come back with stories that harden confidence on both sides. Each ruler reads the other and sees a crack that is not there. and that illusion walks them onto the field at first light. Dawn lifts a pale wind across a wide plain, and the dust runs in long corridors between low rises. Wagon fort rims brace the ridge and hammered stakes bite the ground, with shallow cuts in the earth guiding sight and fire. Bronze mouths rest on timber, and the lines behind them breathe in calm measure. Match cords smoldering like small suns under the chill. The stillness feels built on purpose. A quiet room made of wood and iron where movement will pay a price. Across the open ground, the ranks gather in depth. Banners waking to the breeze and lances trembling as if eager to write their names on the day. Horses stamp and snort, and the files lean forward. A dark river coiled to side the center. Captains pass short signals, and a prayer rolls through the saddles like low thunder. The next sound will answer them, and the morning will choose. The first thunder does not crash all at once, but rolls in a measured ripple. Muzzle after muzzle, coughing flame along the ridge. Wheels bite their boards. Barrels jump and settle. And smoke lifts in slow gray sheets that fold back over the plain. Between volleys, there is a hush, like a held breath, and then the next line of iron speech goes out. Steady as a drum that knows only one beat. From the saddle, the world jerks sideways as air turns to splinters and hot dust. Horses shy and then lunge, and riders drag the charge back into a point. Banners vanish and reappear in the drifting veil, and men call to one another as if names could pull bodies through smoke. Files bunch in the choke of fear and resolve, then try to fan out again. But the ground itself seems to move under a will, not their own. Down the slope, the gun line breathes forward in human steps. Match cord embers, winking along a wall that does not hurry. Officers tap canes and hands rise and fall and ranks turn like gears. One file speaking, while the other reloads, and the cadence never breaks. The first lesson writes itself in powder on the wind, that momentum without cover and cadence bleeds out before a prepared line. The riders see it and rage hardens to a new vow, and the hammer shifts to find the flank where thunder must be met. Pennons snap like whips as the wedges form and point toward the right. Riders crouch low and eyes locked on a seam in the smoke. Hooves skid and catch, and the line knits into a single blade. Oaths spilling from mouths white with breath and grit. They plunge into thunder and feel the ground answer back. A living drum under foam and iron. And for a heartbeat, the world narrows to point and impact. The screen ahead does not meet them head-on, but slides and wheels. Sipahis showing flank and refusing to be pinned. The charge follows the shape offered, funneled by horse archers in empty space. And then the guns open sudden alleys through bodies and speed. Smoke pulls like a curtain, and the lanes close and open again. A cruel rhythm that eats seconds and turns momentum into stalls and scrambles. Riders drag banners upright and push again, only to find the earth lined with teeth. Hesitation blooms where certainty had lived, and timing frays as squads arrive too soon or too late and never together. A knot breaks, reforms, and breaks once more. Courage scattering into brave little storms that cannot find the anvil they need. Shouts lose their words and become sound. And the hammer keeps swinging in air that will not harden. Through the shifting gray, a darker wall takes shape. Boots set in rows and match cords winking, and the field tilts toward discipline that speaks in measured fire. Intervals are chalked into the earth, and boots find them without looking. A grid stamped onto living ground. Officers tap canes in calm measure, and the front rank settles its muzzles while the second ranks breathe and wait. At the signal, the first line speaks, and then breaks like a wave and steps back through ordered gaps as the next line glides into place. The shape is not a crowd but a diagram made of men. And the diagram moves. Vanish. Fire. Step. Load. The cycle turns with patient teeth that never slip. Match cord embers run like a string of small suns, and smoke folds into a traveling wall that opens and closes on command. Each volley lands where the officers point their canes, and each pause is the length of a breath trained to obey. The wall advances a pace, and then another until the ground itself seems to count. The riders reach for the last yards where lances win and find only air that thickens and parts in cruel rhythm. Squadrons shear into fragments, pressed into alleys of smoke and shock where courage becomes small and lonely. Hooves slide, reins drag, and the closing rush loses its edge against a cadence that does not feel pain. The curtain lifts just enough to show the guns waiting to turn and rake the broken approach. Wheels bite the plank platforms and trails heave as crews muscle bronze to the left and then the right, carving new angles through the haze. Barrels nod and fix, and the next salvo rakes the charge from the side. An iron scythe cutting along the grain. The wedges that seemed so sharp a moment ago ripple and fray, caught between the forward hunger of horses and the sideways teeth of fire. Smoke lifts and falls, and within it the gun line keeps sliding. Patient hands closing a trap that was drawn long before the first hoof moved. The last yards shrink to nothing as the ground grows claws. Stakes stand chewed by hooves and hold their line. Wagon rims bristle, and shallow cuts in the earth trip the living and swallow speed. Riders find pits where they expected pasture and tight turns where they needed open space. Banners catching on rims and ropes, and the sudden roughness of engineered earth. The promise of contact dies within sight of faces. Fronts shiver and buckle while the rear presses forward and the middle grinds as if between stones. Men wheel wide to escape a lane only to meet another, and the formation eats itself in the crossfire. Courage crushed by angles and boards, and drill. The plain does not feel like fate now, but design with a human mind behind it. The guns fall silent for a breath, and the question passes to command. To iron patience on one ridge and sacred momentum on the other. Powder haze lifts and settles as a gloved hand closes on the rein and holds the line steady against the pull of triumph. A single flag snaps, and the guns answer in clipped breaths. Officers shaping the air with calm hands. The files taking one pace and no more. Selim watches like a locksmith turning a key, keeping powder dry. Gaps closed, and tempers bridled while the plan grinds forward with the patience of iron. The machine does not chase noise. It waits for weight to shift, and then it breathes in together. Into that breath rides Ismail, blade bright in the smoke, horse flecks of foam on his boots, a cry rising that rolls through saddles and finds 1,000 throats. He carves a path and the path bleeds back, the wall refusing to move. The air full of sparks that cling to cloth and skin. A cut opens on the king and on the myth that carried him. A thin red line where certainty flickers and the cheer thins into breath. In the instant between rush and recoil, the field tilts. And the next movement belongs to the hand that held back for this very hour. The machine finally moves and the left wing turns like a door on a greased hinge, while the right holds fast under the beat of the guns. Sipahis flare outward, then fold inward, and azabs open the scissors so the field itself seems to close on the riders. Hooves carve crescents in the dust, and kettle drums thud beneath the steady voice of bronze. The charge meets moving edges and begins to bend. At the center, the Janissary step as one, and the wall becomes a wedge that does not lose its line. Standards on the far side list and then sag as runners vanish into veils of grit and never return. Hand signs pass like quick sparks, and files press forward with the same breath that fed the last volley. The command web phrase until orders sound like prayers that fall short of ears. What began as a fighting withdrawal turns to a stumble, and then a run as dusk climbs and the sun goes thin. Men choose between the crush at their backs and the iron in their faces, and the ground gives no mercy. Banners drop in pairs, and swords flash once and go dark, and the river of bodies breaks into small streams that do not know their own names. The thunder starts to fade, and what remains is breath, and the scrape of boots, and the long count of the living and the dead. The field lies quiet under a heavy sky, and the dust has settled into a film on steel and skin. Broken bows, split lances, and dented plates make a shore around islands of stillness, where men breathe in hiccups. Torn standards are pinned to the earth by spearheads, and water skins pass from hand to hand across old lines. Surgeons work with knives wiped on cloaks, and prayers move like a soft wind through smoke that clings to everything. Selim does not spend what he cannot replace, and the magazines stand ringed by watchful men. Flags speak once, and the guns go silent. Powder saved. Horses cooled. the machine folded back into order. Scouts track shadows and count fires, while the army stays rooted to the ridge that won the day. On the far side, Ismail is no longer at the front, and a wound to the flesh has opened a wound in the myth that carried his riders. From the knots of captives come plain words about wagon-forts and lines of stakes and drilled men who did not run. They talk about match cords that burned like patient stars and a wall that moved as if it could think. And they talk about how courage scattered when the wall did not break. The lesson sounds simple in the gray light. That repeatable power has its own kind of faith, and it keeps time. The thunder has passed and the count begins, and the road ahead belongs to those who can turn discipline into steel. The city gates yawn, and the road pours in men in colors that climb the walls like morning. Banners lift over roofs and courtyards, while bazaars fall to a hush and coin scales tip under new hands. Scribes sit with tallies and seals, and workshops are opened one by one. Looms stilled as inspectors pass beneath their lintels. The air carries the smell of oil and dust, and the slow understanding that a crown has lost some of its light. Selim stands inside the ceremony and chooses measure over hunger. A victory held like a coin, kept for later weight. The army does not spill forward, and the magazines do not empty, and the ridge outside remains a promise instead of a grave. Across the realm, stories falter, and the glow around a name grows thin as people learn the taste of doubt. What follows now is not only steel, but the hands that fund it and drill it and turn its rhythm into power. Technology here means a system that wakes on time and pays on time and fires on time. Ledgers shut with a thud. Pay chests are counted. Magazine keys change hands. And muster rolls turn names into ranks that move like a single creature. In the drill yard, the Janissary learns a cadence that becomes a habit, and a habit that becomes a wall of flame. Treasury, roads, and training bind the metal to the men until firepower is not a miracle but a schedule. Across the border, the crown leans on charisma and the saddle, on oaths under bright banners and the old promise that a brave charge can shear through doubt. Foundries will come and musketeers will gather, but they arrive late and every lesson is paid in lives. Reform moves like a wounded horse, brave but slow, while the gun line speaks with a voice that never shakes. From this field, the tale begins to shift from chivalry sung to entries written, and the world listens for the ledger. Silken pennons once ruled men's imaginations, yet the century learned to count in volleys and chalked intervals. What looked like legend from the saddle met the math of spacing, powder, and timing, and the tale bent under its own bright weight. Oaths rode forward into a wall built by muster rolls and pay chests, a plain fact that would not blink. Courage kept its honor, but the field crowned the cadence of drilled fire. The new order speaks in the voice of the common shooter who holds a match cord and keeps the beat. He does not glitter and he does not sing, yet his line turns princes into targets and myths into smoke. Power moves from a single heroic rush to a system that arrives on time and repeats itself until belief grows quiet. The seal hardens on this verdict, and the age reads its name in iron.